Hey guys, welcome to another rendition of online learning. Today we're going to start our Era of Good Feelings unit where we look at nationalism and sectionalism. Nationalism is where you have pride in your country, looking at the country as a whole. Sectionalism, we are going to be looking at different parts of the country and how those parts are more interested in what's going on locally or regionally and do a little bit of a comparison. Um, so let's talk about our main ideas. The first things that we're going to be talking about is changes in manufacturing that start our own American Industrial Revolution. We're going to look at how that creates a divide between North and South because of where it happens, and how, because of things like slavery, we are going to see even more of a divide between North and South. Later on in our next unit next week, we're going to look at Andrew Jackson, so don't worry about 3 and 4 right now. All right, our essential question. This question is going to dominate our next 2 units. So can a nation thrive when its regions have differing economic and political priorities? This question you're going to keep coming back to over and over again. And at the end of the unit, you're going to need to be able to answer this question using examples from our unit on the Era of Good Feelings. You will see it again when we talk about Jackson and the Market Revolution, which you'll learn about next week. So let's look at our map and where we're starting off. If you remember, the last thing we talked about was the War of 1812 under Madison's presidency. He was our 4th president. War of 1812 was when we fought Great Britain because they were attacking us over here on the frontier where my mouse is, and they were attacking us at sea. They were disrupting our trade. They were impressing or kidnapping our soldiers. So we had a war with them. It ended in a stalemate. We signed the Treaty of Ghent, and now we can go back to focusing on ourselves. So first thing we're going to look at is how the impact of War of 1812 created this new regional economic system. We're going to be looking at the North, South, and West. So here's your big idea. This comes straight from the textbook. So the big idea is that the North and South develop different economic systems because of how the economies are being run. That's going to lead to differences in politics, and we're going to see the development of this new area, the West, as we continue to move out west and take more land. All right, main idea about the Industrial Revolution. When we say another revolution affects America, we're talking about industry. We're going to see industry moving from the household, so like cottage industry, where you would take work home and work there, to working in workshops and factories. We're going to see the factory system make mass production available. So that's where we can make a whole bunch of goods for cheap. Because of that, we're going to change how we do our market system. All these changes in manufacturing are going to bring about this new revolution, our own industrial revolution. So let's see where it starts. Britain is going to have the first industrial revolution. If you remember from your world history classes, in the 18th century, Britain is going to start the first powerhouses built from steam and from coal. This is because they're an island, so they have a whole bunch of moving water, which allows them to do industry anywhere in the country. Then they're going to move to coal-powered items, heating it up, creating steam, and moving on from there. They develop the power-driven machines for mass production, and they're going to build factories. We are going to end up copying those factories, and we'll see where they end up. The factors of production. I don't know if any of you guys actually remember the factors of production when you talked about this in civics class, so let's do a little bit of a review on that. The factors of production are land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurs. You got to be able to have the land to build the factories. You have to have a labor force willing to work in the conditions. You have to have the capital, which is the money, not like the capital like in a city. And you have to have industrialists, people who have brains that create these new industries. You have entrepreneurs who are willing to risk money in starting these new businesses. So those 4 things come together and they create what we call the factors of production. So Britain has it first, and we are watching Britain. So in the late 1700s, 1793, Sam Slater is going to build our first thread factory. So that is for clothing. That is how we're going to make our clothes. and he's actually going to steal the plant ideas. So he's going to basically, kind of like we used to do with Legos, uh, learn how to make it, build it from scratch, take it apart, all that stuff. And then without using any instructions, we rebuild it in a new place. So Sam Slater steals that idea from England. He's going to take it to New England and he's going to build that first factory. This is going to start the domino effect of other people starting to build new factories, and we will start to see ourselves industrialize. Um, in 1813, so about 20 years later, we're going to be using plans from another English mill, so stealing more ideas from England. You're going to have the big guy, which is Francis Cabot Lowell, Nathan Appleton, and Patrick Jackson, who are going to mechanize or make factories for all the stages of cloth making. So we're going to have a section where we build the thread, like the spinning jenny. We're going to have a section where we start to build weaving factories. These things are going to turn into what become famously known as the Lowell mills, where you're going to have mostly women or young children going and creating very, very cheap cloth so that we can start to build textile mills throughout New England. This is exactly the same picture as your book has. So it talks to you about the different parts of the mill. You've got the power looms, you've got the spinning machines, you've got the water that you need so that you can move it. You had to be by running water, all the streams, which is why it's going to be easier to do this in New England because they're the ones who have the moving streams. They're the ones who are going to be on the coast. So they're going to be more adept at creating these textile mills. New England's going to keep industrializing. We're going to become a booming manufacturing center. So mostly, like I said, mostly young women are going to leave their family farms out west or down in the south so that they can get a chance at making some money for their families. And we're going to see a shift in population. This is why your New England cities are going to start to grow and become very, very big and powerful and wealthy. Now, we talked about the economy in the North. We know that that's going to be mostly manufacturing, like we just looked at. Now let's compare it to the economy in the South. They are still going to be developing around agriculture. That doesn't mean that there's not agriculture in the North. You still had the breadbasket area, which is like Pennsylvania, New York, and then you've got the Northwest, which is places like Ohio. So you had all this nice, lush farmland there. They're not good geography for growing cash crops. So we're not growing things like rice, cotton, tobacco, those things that have dominated in the South because the soil just can't last that long and doesn't have the right growing season for it. So instead, they are going to focus on growing things like livestock. They still have large wheat and corn farms, but they're going to focus on growing only about one or two crops instead of putting all of their money into one crop like the South did. So the old Northwest, in some places in the North New England area, are going to focus on this type of growing. They're more interested in producing cities, so markets where you can go and trade and buy these goods rather than growing them themselves, but they do have agriculture. This is where we see the big divide. So remember our question, how do the economies affect our politics? How can we get along if they're so different? So because grains like corn and wheat and livestock do not need much labor or yield the same amount of profit, there is no need for slavery. Slavery is going to be phased out in the North pretty quickly by the end of the 1700s. And most northern states are actually going to take an abolitionist stance. So that means they're going to be against slavery because, in all honesty, they see slavery as adverse to the working condition. If you can have slaves, that means you don't have to pay your workers. That is direct competition against those who do want to be paid for their labor. So they do not want slavery because they see it as a competition to their livelihood. Looking down at the South, this should not be a surprise to any of us who know anything about the South. Cotton is going to be the major crop. We are going to make this shift from growing tobacco to growing cotton because the North mechanized the cotton industry. Remember, because they created all these spinning wheels, they created weaving machines, they created textiles, and made it easier to produce cloth. Well, the cloth we're producing is based in cotton. So cotton is going to be grown throughout the South. Eli Whitney is this guy right here. He's going to create the cotton gin. The way the cotton gin works is think of it like a comb. All of cotton has a bunch of seeds in it. So you used to have to take the cotton itself. Everybody involved in the process would have to clean the cotton after picking it. This machine allows you to clean the cotton by simply sticking it into the mechanized wheel that has a whole bunch of picks in it, and it combs out the seeds. Therefore, we're going to see a huge rise in the cotton industry. This way of living only worked if you had slaves. So poor non-slave holding farmers would go west to try their luck elsewhere. That is why you're going to have these states, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama, develop so quickly because they have that hot geography that allows for cotton growth. So whereas our states used to dominate over here in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, we are going to move west to try and spread that cotton industry. Because of the cotton gin and because of the need for a labor force, slavery is going to become stuck in this system. Cotton is hugely profitable, and by the 1820s, the demand for slaves increases by tenfold. It parallels, if you look at this chart right here, with the increase in slave population. So if you look at the red line, you see 1790, slaves are going to go at an increased rate, and it's going to parallel with how much cotton that we are growing in the South. We're going to start right up next with Clay's American System, so hang tight, and we'll be back soon.